Go ahead, Tony, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you, guys. I'll just launch into my presentation, if you don't mind. I'll get to the introduction a little later on. Good afternoon, Chairman Bizzarro, members of the committee, and Representative Madden, who joined us at the Parkland Memorial this week. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. Nothing is more important than our nation's children, and I appreciate you holding this hearing on school safety. 4 years, the span of a high school career. Many of us look back fondly at those memories. Sadly, it's been 4 years since our daughter Gina, since we sent her to school with an I love you and some chocolates and a reminder to eat them before they melted. My wife and I never imagined that would be the last time we would see her, the last time we would be a complete and happy family. 4 years ago, multiple mistakes, some in the moment and some that had piled up over the years, converged to create a tragedy that left my Gina and 16 other wonderful souls dead. My name is Tony Montalto. I appear today on behalf of Stand with Parkland, the National Association of Families for Safe Schools. I am president of this organization that was founded by the families of the children and staff members murdered at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School on February 14th of 2018. Our organization is uniquely inclusive and nonpartisan. We advocate for practical school safety reforms to prevent future mass shootings in America's schools. We use the school safety triad: enhanced campus security, improved mental health screening and support programs, and if you choose to own one, responsible firearms ownership. All three of these things failed us and led to tragedy. We recognize the importance of fulsome discussions and compromise in order to develop and implement pragmatic solutions. This model has been effective as we've worked on legislation in Florida, and we hope Pennsylvania will adopt these life-saving measures as well. As a result of this willingness to compromise and commitment to meaningful progress, Stand with Parkland has facilitated large strides in school safety legislation in our home state of Florida. The first example of this was the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act in 2018. It added programs to secure the campus, increased funding for mental health, and made significant changes to firearms laws. We saw political courage as lawmakers worked across the aisle, and this law passed with bipartisan support through a Republican-controlled legislature with a Republican governor, just 3 short weeks after my daughter's murder. This law created the Office of Safe Schools within the Department of Education and mandated each school district to identify a school safety specialist to ensure accountability and compliance oversight authority. Another positive addition was the implementation of the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Commission that Max had just mentioned, established to investigate the Parkland massacre and make recommendations to the state legislature to improve school safety and security. After sitting through hundreds of hours of expert testimony before the commission, I have gained knowledge of the failures that occurred leading to Gina's death, as well as insights into areas that need to be corrected to help prevent tragedy. In the current legislative session, Stand with Parkland has introduced an amendment to create a district-wide mental health coordinator to ensure that students receiving mental health services are on a path for the best possible outcome. Directly reporting to the superintendent and the Office of Safe Schools, they must provide quarterly status reports on students that have gone through behavioral threat assessment and management. Stand with Parkland has worked with the National Threat Assessment Center, known as NTAC, which is part of the U.S. Secret Service. In 2019 and 2020, Max, Ryan Petty, who lost his daughter Elena, and I toured the nation, telling our sad and cautionary tale as the NTAC team trained over 5,000 law enforcement, mental health, and school professionals on their Protecting America Schools report, and the most proactive tool we have to prevent targeted attacks on our schools: behavioral threat assessment teams. These are multidisciplinary in nature, bringing school professionals, law enforcement, and mental health specialists together to evaluate students who have demonstrated concerning behavior. These assessments are not designed to stigmatize or punish the student and are best conducted long before the threshold of law enforcement action. In most cases, this is the best way to intercede and get students help through programs that are already available. In their 2021 report, Averted School Attacks, the National Threat Assessment Center identified school resource officers, or SROs, as helping to prevent over 2/3 of the attacks they studied. They help coordinate and implement safety plans. They provide guidance to struggling students, serve as role models, and establish a positive relationship between law enforcement and the school community. And as I know all too well, they are the last line of defense for students and teachers when an attack occurs. Stand with Parkland supports armed individuals at schools as provided for in Florida law. We believe that arming teachers is a misguided idea, however. We believe our teachers should be focused on teaching, and trained law enforcement or security officers should be provided to protect our students and staff at school. The 2021 Averted Attacks Report also showed another key to stopping targeted school attacks. It's a way to provide students a way to warn authorities about what they see and hear. Frequently, attackers will attempt to recruit others to join them or warn some peers about upcoming attacks. Here is an opportunity to leverage technology and make it easier for students to pass these warning signs to school officials and law enforcement by using mobile device applications. After the massacre in Parkland, our state created the Fortify Florida app. However, there are others on the market, such as Safer Watch, Safe to Tell, and Safe UT, which perform multiple functions in addition to tip reporting, such as two-way communications, emergency alert notification, and panic alarm functions. In 2019, New Jersey enacted the ELISA alert system law, and Florida followed in 2020. These panic button laws are useful as part of an overall safety package. However, NTAC reports have shown that no school attacks were stopped by law enforcement responding to the campus. This is yet another reason why carefully selected and trained SROs are vital to the safety of our students and teachers. Stand with Parkland saw the successful passage of extreme risk protection orders, commonly known as red flag laws in Florida, as part of the response to the massacre that took our loved ones. These are powerful tools that can save lives by creating a way for family members and law enforcement to act before warning signs escalate to tragedies. This legislation also touches on the mental health part of the holistic approach needed to achieve school safety and is effective in many states, including your neighbors, New York and New Jersey. Our extreme risk protection orders allow for the removal of firearms from the homes of those deemed to be a danger to themselves or others. To balance the rights of the individual in question, there must be strong due process provisions and penalties for knowingly making a false report. There are numerous warnings regarding the murder of our loved ones and over 40 law enforcement visits to his residence. Had red flag laws been in place, Parkland would still be our idyllic hometown and not known for the horror that occurred. In the aftermath of Gina's murder, 15 states in the District of Columbia chose to adopt these laws, which proactively help keep firearms in the hands of responsible owners. The Biden administration has provided model red flag laws for states to use when crafting their own versions of these laws. Now, 40% of states have risk protection orders. And in those states, hunters still hunt, collectors still curate their collections, and individuals are still able to protect themselves. Will Pennsylvania's elected leaders choose to improve the safety of their students and help reduce suicide rates, or cave in to fear-mongering from special interest groups? Another change needed in Florida law was to make it illegal to make a threat toward schools on social media. It's vital that our laws keep up with changing technology. One effective school safety measure passed in Florida was to establish better communication between schools, parents, administrative staff, health counselors, and students. Families deserve to have access to information on what happens inside the school and to students, but they need that information as quickly as possible. That's why Stand with Parkland created the Parents Need to Know initiative, which became part of our Senate Bill 590, a bill on school safety. It became law in July and now requires timely notification of threats to and emergencies on school grounds, school transportation, and at school sponsored events. Families now have more information to make better choices regarding their children's safety. I only wish I knew of the threat to my daughter's school. I could have found a way to keep her from harm. New for 2022 is a comprehensive school safety package that addresses yet more issues arising out of the death of my bright and bubbly daughter, her classmates, and her teachers. Stand with Parkland's founding families suffered through a disjointed and horrific reunification process as we awaited to hear word regarding the fate of our children and spouses. Some waiting until the wee hours of the morning, being forced to listen to the cries of others as they heard the worst news a parent could hear. Some, like my wife, were isolated from her supporters until I arrived. Then we were told of Gina's death and left to figure out the next steps on our own. This bill offers a fix by mandating stakeholders come together and develop a coordinated reunification plan so families and children may be reunited in a more orderly fashion. The Parkland investigation showed that the system failed and staff reacted poorly during the Parkland massacre. Some, if not all, the students' deaths were caused by this. To help ensure students are safe, we need all stakeholders to participate in age-appropriate drills. As an airline pilot for over 30 years, I know the value of frequent training and debriefing what went well and what needs to be done better to improve performance and keep people safe. We need that same accountability for our schools, our administrators, and our teachers. Lives are at stake there as well. The legislation that Stand with Parkland has recommended and helped create in Florida has made schools and communities safer. We hope that Pennsylvania will take on their own versions of these bills or provisions of them that will do the same for your teachers, parents, and students. On behalf of Stand with Parkland, the National Association of Families for Safe Schools, I thank the Pennsylvania House Democratic Policy Committee for holding this critical hearing and inviting us to discuss school safety priorities. 4 years ago, our loved ones were taken from us in a senseless and preventable act of violence at their school. We implore you to act before any Pennsylvania families are devastated by preventable acts of violence in our nation's schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank the both of you for the courage to come here today and speak to us, for sharing your stories, which I wish neither one of you would have ever had to share with anyone or any of us. We have a few questions in the room, and I want to get to them to make sure that everything is answered. Our first person is Representative Isaacson.
Thank you. And to both of you, my deepest sympathies. My son is a freshman in college, and my daughter's a sophomore in college, so they were a freshman and sophomore in high school when you had your great tragedy, and we all went through it with you. But as a legislator, I know as an animal rights advocate that there is plenty of research that shows a correlation between harming animals and future trends of harming others, whether it's domestic violence or with armed, with guns and everything else. So you talked about a database to streamline. How do we get the communication between law enforcement, things that are reported in school so that the profiling can take place, and so that, I guess you said this National Threat Assessment Group is able to kind of make the correlation so that, and how do you get that communicated to the schools and the local law enforcement is really my question. Like, what kind of legislation? Listen, we're Pennsylvania. It's a different state with regard to when it comes to guns and everything else. So I'm looking more at what can we do from a reporting standpoint to protect our children, because red flag laws and everything else, where I am a co-sponsor of every single bill for gun control in this Commonwealth, getting that through in any way, shape, or form is very difficult here. So if you could just briefly, and I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm sorry if I'm asking a complicated question.
So Pennsylvania's doing some great things. You've got this Safe to Say program, which takes the tips, and you've gotten tens of thousands of tips from kids all over your state to prevent harm to others and prevent, mass acts of targeting in every K through 12 school. That is the vehicle that brings this in all these different stakeholders together to have that conversation, to analyze this threat properly and make sure that you're not missing anything. And on that threat assessment team, you've got a school resource officer, you've got a school psychologist, assistant principal, a teacher, and from that collaborative approach and everybody looking at it from different points of view, then you're able to look at a threat. You've got the tips coming in. They should come into that team, and you're able to get these individuals the help that they need, get them off their pathway to violence, make sure they don't hurt themselves or others. Right, Tony, if you have anything to add?
Yeah, so there's a workflow that many of those applications that I mentioned have established already, not only in Florida, but in other states, that will enable the tips to come in and make sure they get to the right people. As far as behavioral threat assessment teams and what the National Threat Assessment Center does, they don't come out and do the threat assessments. What they do is they come into your local school districts and they will train the individuals that the school district sends to them on how to do the behavioral threat assessment and how to execute that process so that we can, again, intervene and get kids help before they resort to violence. It's free training. All you have to do is contact them, and their website is available on Stand with Parkland's resources page. So we hope that Dr. Alathari and her team will come out and train as many people as you need. But that's the key. They come out and they train the school people, and then the school people are the ones who are on the ground and actually find the answers.
Okay, thank you so much for both of you.
Thank you. Senator Brewster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank both of you gentlemen, and on behalf of all of us on here, we offer our belated condolences. In a strange way, you all have encouraged us even from the day of the event in Parkland. In 2018, Pennsylvania, through their budget, established the Pennsylvania School Safety and Security Commission. I'm one of 24 members on that commission, and many of the things that you've just said, and I want to thank you for it, because I've been a big advocate of the core causes, and you've talked about how to get to the core causes by collecting the data. And it seems to me that your information today will go a long way to helping us in Pennsylvania to fine-tune what we currently do for Safe to Say and other opportunities. The question I have, and you did touch on it, both of you, and I, again, thank you both for a very comprehensive explanation of what you've done through difficult times. I have great admiration for what both of you have done. I have mentioned through our caucus the need for funding to do school psychiatrists, school psychologists, to be available for teachers, administrators, students, and what have you. And it sounds like you have witnessed that in some school districts. And I'm a believer that if we don't identify the core causes and address those, and they are expensive, and mental health is the number one that we've talked about up here, and we talk a lot about it, but have you through your work identified any clear, succinct ways to deal with the core causes, whether it be poverty, addiction, abuse at home, mental health? Have you gotten to the point where we can identify a plan, and it's going to cost money, because that's why I'm bringing it up. We have to find a way to fund these things. Some of the schools, and one of you, I said you talked to a principal, and that person didn't know how many events had happened and that sort of thing. So we're a long way from being able to say, here's the pattern, here's the blueprint to deal with this based on the data we know. Have you gotten to the point where you've put a document together to address those core causes. That's for either one of you.
So Stand with Parkland has actually supported and helped get hopefully get a bill through the legislature this year that addresses some of those things. We realize that the students don't live in a vacuum. So part of what this bill does is make sure that parents are aware of other services that are available in the community once we find a student who needs services. And then we also have mandated that the school districts will take a look at the families, and if any family member looks like they could benefit from other services, we make sure they're aware of those as well. The Secret Service in their reports has shown that there's no one cause. There's what they call a constellation of behavioral indicators. So we know that having more dollars for mental health programs and getting more mental health counselors in schools all around the nation, there's a shortage. And one of the things we're doing is supporting a bill up on Capitol Hill that is by one of the Pennsylvania representatives, Brian Fitzpatrick, and it's the Mental Health in Schools Excellence Act. And that will provide federal grant dollars to more students so they go to school, graduate, and then enter the school psychology field. So there's just a multitude of ways to do it. I wish there was one simple answer, but I'm afraid there's not.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you,
sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next question will come from Representative Madden.
Thank you. And to Max and to Tony, I've said this before, but thank you so much for taking this tragedy and creating a blueprint for all of us to keep our children safe. We are eternally grateful, and I hope this legislature is smart enough to take up your recommendations and all the bills that you've provided for us. My question for you is around funding. Has the funding been consistent from the Florida legislature? Has enough money been appropriated? Have you seen a real increase in guidance counselors and mental health counselors and school safety officers? Are you satisfied with the response that you've gotten each and every year? Because I know if I look at our history of funding, and we started funding school safety after Parkland in 2019, it's not always been consistent. So I'd like to hear you speak to the consistency of it. And I know both of you have mentioned communication being key. And if you could just speak to really quickly, how has the overall communication improved? And do you feel like there are safeguards in place now in Florida should this happen again?
Max, you want to start?
No, you start and I'll finish up.
Okay, so I'd say that every year we have seen increased funding put towards our school safety initiatives. As we created the Office of Safe Schools, we then that initially was just one person. Now it's expanded, and they have drawn in some staff from the Department of Education. They now have regional representatives that go out to the schools in order to help them and assure that they're following the mandates that are put out. So there has been an increase in funding along those lines. Just this year, as part of a continuing mental health improvement initiative, we saw the governor request more money in his budget. I'm sorry, I don't have the number off the top of my head. But of course, finding a steady stream so that schools can and mental health professionals can be acquired and know what's available to them is, of course, the best of all worlds. But as we know, there's a constant push and pull on everything. So any funding you can give is better than no funding. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Tony.
Representative Madden, first of all, I want to say, thank you so much for coming to Parkland. That was very, very sweet of you to join the families and come to the memorial. That was really, really kind of you. And I think that it's important to come and visit with us and really understand what happened in our community. You've got to be there, and you got to visit with us. So thank you for that, and I appreciate your leadership. As far as the funding, we have gotten a lot of funding from our governor. Hundreds of millions of dollars have flowed down through the governor after the tragedy. But Tony and I are here because we should not have to wait for a horrible tragedy to happen for every state to take this seriously and prioritize the safety and security of our children. You have a $8-9 billion surplus this year. Let's allocate some of it towards education and towards making our schools safer. In Florida, we've done things that no other state has done. We've mandated that there has to be an armed school safety officer on every campus. We have implemented threat assessment teams in every school, and that training comes from our new Office of Safe Schools, as Tony detailed. They conduct training. They push it out throughout the entire state, through every district. We've got a school safety officer, school safety specialist that's in charge of school safety. So we've gotten funding. Obviously, you can always use more, but we've done a lot of school hardening. We've done focused on the prevention side, and now Stand with Parkland is focusing on the recovery side as well with the reunification. But it's a holistic approach. There's no one panacea for school safety. It's very, very difficult to have a completely serene environment, and we want to keep it as an educational facility. The main purpose is to educate our youth, but in Florida, most of our educators, all of our educators understand that if the children and the staff do not make it home every day, nothing else matters.
Thank you, Max. Thank you, Tony.
I want to thank the both of you for being here today. Max, thank you for coming up from Florida. Tony, thank you for your testimony. And again, on behalf of all of us here, we pass on our condolences and sympathies to the families. I was a resident of Pembroke Pines for years. I'm well aware of your community. We almost moved to Parkland before we came here, the Coral Springs area. So I'm well aware of the school. And thank you for coming up here and helping us through this so we never see a tragedy like this again.